It's time for Point of View Politics, your place for local political happenings. Two political notes from here in the Valley tonight. First, Democrats are delegating in today's Forum editorial that cites the deep reservoir of goodwill among North Dakotans towards U.S. Senate candidate Heidi Heitkamp. The paper states the Republicans know they have to deal with the formidable campaigner in Heitkamp, but to be clear, it is a long way from any kind of endorsement. Also tonight, the behind-the-scenes work continues for the candidates jockeying for the GOP U.S. House slot being vacated by Representative Berg. Brian Cox sent out an email to supporters today that talked about plans to recruit delegates to GOP district conventions. Cox writes that our number one priority will be to recruit as many delegates as possible for the district conventions. The process begins later this week with district reorganization meetings. And in late March, the U.S. Supreme Court will hear the challenges to the Affordable Health Care Act, and opponents call it Obamacare. And Chris Berg from 1100 AM The Flag is leading a debate over the issue. Hi, Chris.
Thanks, Yvonne. It is a huge debate. 70% of North Dakotans said we don't want this. One of the big reasons why Berg defeated Earl Pomeroy in the U.S. House race. And tonight, to have this debate with me, Representative Kim Koppelman from North Dakota, also North Dakota State Senator Tim Mathern. Tomorrow, Tim Mathern and other legislators across the country are going to actually send an amicus brief to the U.S. Supreme Court saying, hey, we are on the side of this Affordable Care Act. So, Senator Mathern, let's start with you. I've got my handy-dandy pocket constitution with me. Tell me or show me in here where the U.S. government can force me to buy something.
First of all, the U.S. government does not force you to buy anything. The issue we have before us is what is going on in this country, what is applying to the entire range of states. And we have found that 20% of our economy deals with health care. So health care is within the purview of the federal government. The Affordable Care Act just says, let's all get together, make this deal work, and let's permit states to have features that fit each state. So the Affordable Care Act is constitutional because it's about the federal government working with states. And what has happened is a lot of people who lost the vote now are going around the political process and going to the courts to try to get their policy preference.
So let me get two things straight. One is you're starting to sound like a 10th Amendment Republican, right? They're talking about giving power to the states. And two is that so you're saying that there's no individual mandate in the Affordable Care Act.
There is a requirement that everybody who takes part in getting something also takes part in paying for it. That is what is the Affordable Care Act. We have developed a system in this country essentially by agreeing to give everybody health care. In Fargo-Moorhead, for example, if someone doesn't have health care insurance, we'll take them into the hospital, we'll give them care, and we'll send them home. We don't let them die in the street. We don't shoot them. We give everybody care. This bill, passed by Congress, says everybody should take part in paying for that health care.
Then let's do this. Why don't we just go back to a straight, you pay cash for your health care services? Why don't you guys go out there and be a proponent for that then?
Because some people don't have cash, and some people don't have insurance, and they still get health care. If you don't have health insurance, Chris, and you get hurt or you have a heart attack, we'll take you in and care for you. You may not have paid in a cent. That really means that everybody else here pays for your health care. The Affordable Care Act just says everybody who gets health care in our country should pay into making sure that health care is available for everybody to the degree that they are able.
Senator Mathern, thank you. Representative Koppelman, I want to get you in this conversation. You and I have got a lot to talk about, Senator Mathern. But what I'm hearing him say is that there's no individual mandate in the Affordable Care Act. Are you buying this?
Well, obviously that's not true. I think, the senator, and by the way, we're good friends in the legislature. We disagree on issues, obviously, but we respect one another and work well together. The important thing about this is I believe that Obamacare is clearly unconstitutional. And I think that's why some courts have upheld that kind of view on the issue. And that's really our debate tonight. We've talked about a lot of ancillary issues and the question of whether it's a good idea, bad idea, et cetera. Those are legislative debates. Those are philosophical debates. Those are the kind of debates Senator Mathern and I would have if we were debating this issue on the floor of the legislature. That's not what this session is about. This session is about whether or not it's constitutional. And that's what the court will be deciding. I believe that this legislation is clearly unconstitutional for a few reasons. Number one, it abuses federal power. It goes way beyond any constitutional authority for the federal government to regulate. It infringes upon state sovereignty by what's called in legal jargon commandeering the state legislatures. There was a Second Amendment case where the federal government tried to impose its will on states with regard to gun control. And the court said no. It was called the Prince case. And they said, no, you can't do that. That's going beyond what the federal government has the right to do. Secondly, the individual mandate is one of the key issues of its unconstitutionality because it does, in fact, force you to buy health insurance, or it penalizes you if you don't. Never before in the history of our nation has the federal government had the authority, and has it withstood scrutiny, to require someone to do something. Interstate commerce, which is what they try to hang their hat on, saying, well, you know, healthcare is commerce, therefore we have the right to regulate it, but they're not regulating anything. They're imposing a mandate upon people simply for living and breathing. This doesn't regulate activity, it regulates existence.
Senator Mathern, basically, he just called you a liar, saying that what you're saying is not true.
I said it more nicely than that.
You did.
Well, Representative Koppelman just has it incorrect. And I've read the Constitution, too. I've got that's the entire brief that we are filed. And basically, there's a different point of view. And the point of view that I am upholding, as are legislators from each of the 50 states, from Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia, we have a coalition of legislators who've gone through the Constitution, compared it to the Affordable Care Act, and we believe that there are enough criteria to meet constitutional muster. Now it's up to the Supreme Court, not Representative Koppelman and I, to make that decision.
So let's go ahead.
This has come now to the Supreme Court. They are deciding this.
Let me go out to 2014 when this thing is going to get enacted. I'm sitting around, I've got no health insurance, and you're telling me that now I don't have to go out and buy it?
When it comes to 2014, you're going to hope that the Supreme Court finds this constitutional, because what you are getting out of what you're getting out of this,
buy it or no?
It depends on your circumstance. Are you able to contribute? Then you will be contributing. Are you with an employer maybe that is going to get a tax break to help you get insurance? I suspect, and I know the case is that a lot of people in the journalism field don't get health care insurance. Your employer will be given an incentive, a tax break, and sometimes a tax credit to make sure its employees are able to be in a health care plan. However, getting back to 2014, if this doesn't pass, do you want to give up coverage for 26 and under-year-olds being on their insurance plan?
No, I'm going to tell you what I think needs to happen right after this. I want to take a short break. There is one decision back in the late 1930s, early 1940s that I want to talk about because it is going to create a very slippery slope in the end of March. Keep in mind, there's right now 9 Supreme Court justices. There's going to be a swing vote out of those 9. We're going to talk about that court case next and what are some solutions to these problems that we face in the what I call the disease management system here in America. Stay close. It's the Hot Box right here on 630 POV. Welcome back to 630 POV, the Hot Box. Tonight we're talking about the great debate, the Affordable Care Act. Is it constitutional or not? Before we went to the break, I mentioned there is a court case. Look, let's be frank. We no longer live in sort of a constitutional system. It is now a relative law system. That's why you often hear people say, hey, well, you know what? This court case set a precedence. And one of the court cases I'm concerned about that may set a precedence for the end of March when the Supreme Court hears about the Affordable Care Act is Wickard versus Filburn. If you're not familiar with it, the decision was in 1942. Do yourself a favor and Google it. Again, Wickard versus Filburn. Here's the bottom line. A guy goes out and grows wheat. The U.S. government says, hey, you can only grow X amount of wheat. And they said, well, if you're going to grow more, then we're obviously going to penalize you. And that's what happened for this gentleman, Filburn. But the key thing is, he went out and grew more wheat than he was supposed to because they were concerned about the price in the global markets and all that stuff. But he grew it for his own personal consumption. That's it. And yet the Supreme Court came down on him. So, Kim, Representative Koppelman, for myself, I look at this court case. I know mandate, in my opinion. You say?
Well, not really. The case you're referring to is one of the most liberal cases ever decided by the Supreme Court. It expanded the interpretation of the Commerce Clause, and it's really a high watermark for liberals that has never been reached since. It was at the height of the Depression, the height of the New Deal, FDR's administration, etc. The court has overturned bad decisions before. You know, at one point in the Dred Scott decision, the Supreme Court decided slavery was okay.
But this is an overturn. I mean, this is still
I understand,
active.
but they'll have that opportunity very soon. Not necessarily to return it, but to say they went too far, and I think that's what they'll do. And in North Dakota, we've done a couple of things that are important. Number one, we were one of 26 states to file a lawsuit over this Obamacare case, and I encouraged our Attorney General to do that. I'm sure others did as well. That case led to the decision by a circuit court judge, by a federal district judge, saying that this is unconstitutional, and by the 11th Circuit. That's one of the reasons the case is going to the Supreme Court. Secondly, we introduced and passed legislation during the last session simply stating that no one can force the people of North Dakota to buy health insurance. And thirdly, as recently as November, when we had our special session on redistricting, we refused to implement Obamacare and provide for health care exchanges in our state. So our state's position is clear. You mentioned earlier 70% of the people are against it. I think it's unconstitutional, and I think the court will come down on that side.
Senator Mathern, thank you very much, Kim. I want to give you the last word here. This Wickard versus Filburn case. Again, the 11th District talks about the unconstitutionality of the fact of this individual mandate, which you, for some reason, claim isn't there. But I want to get your thoughts on what do you see happening here at the end of March? I think the decision's going to be in June. What happens here with the Supreme Court and the Affordable Care Act?
Well, the Supreme Court is going to rule that the Affordable Care Act is constitutional.
Based on what?
Based on our history, including that case and all kinds of other cases. However, regardless of how the Supreme Court rules, we are concerned about health care in America. Would we give up what we have gained now that you can't turn people away because they're sick? Would we give up the requirement now that you have to have a certain amount of premiums go to health care and not just go into the pocket of the insurance company? We have dramatic changes that have happened that are good for our citizens. That's going to be upheld. And I look forward to the Supreme Court decision and how we move
Senator
forward.
Mathern, Representative Koppelman, thank you for your time. Look, this is obviously a very heated debate. A couple of things to note is that right now, 20% of the people are driving 80% of the health care costs. And Senator Mathern's exactly right. You and I are paying for the guy that's showing up at the emergency room. So the key thing is this that I think we've got to look at is why not expand health savings account? Why not expand and empower individuals to say, look, if you want to go eat, sleep, and drink yourself into oblivion, go for it. Just go pay cash at the hospital. I don't want to pay for that. And I would assume most of you would agree. But I want to find out from you tonight, is the Affordable Care Act constitutional or not? Yvonne, I think it's going to be a very, very heated debate for some time to come.
It's definitely a hard question. All right. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Senator Mathern and Representative Kim Koppelman. Well, you know what Chris thinks and his guests think? What do you think tonight? Facebook users don't seem to care much about the constitutionality of the issue. Instead, they're worried about the cost of health care. Jill says, I think the health care law needs to go further. We need affordable health coverage offered by a nonprofit like the government. Deductibles are so high that you can't afford to go to the doctor, even if you do have coverage. Dan says, something has to change. I can't afford to go into the doctor unless it's something I feel is life-threatening. Tell me again what the great health care we have in this country when one can never be seen for anything less than lethal illness. Michelle says people who make these laws just don't get it, that some can't afford insurance. And finally, Maria says, when I don't have to choose between having a place to live and having health insurance, I will purchase health insurance again. Wow.